Thank you for having us, for inviting the NEA network. It's the Nordic network for electric aviation. And my name is Maria Fiskerud, and I'm the project manager for the network. It's a pleasure to speak about the network and to tell you the story about NEA. It started in last fall when we got the funding from the Nordic Innovation and the Nordic ministers. They really want us to work together in the Nordics and make the Nordics become a forerunner in this area. And in fact, in one way, we already are. And that's also due to that we have been working for a long time with fossil-free aviation in the Nordics. I don't know how much you know about it, but Finland was actually the first Nordic country flying on sustainable aviation fuel. Or actually, you were the first Nordic country that had an airplane landing with sustainable aviation fuel in it, coming from Schiphol and the Netherlands. And Norway was the second country where both SAS and Norwegian was flying the same day because, of course, they couldn't really compete. They both wanted to be the winner or the first one. And Sweden were the first country in the world with a tank with sustainable aviation fuel. 2008, that's the year when we started to talk about sustainable aviation or fossil-free aviation or carbon zero aviation. We have a lot of words for it today. So it's not been around for very long. About this time last year, we had a meeting in Sweden and we were talking about a little bit about electric aviation. And everyone was saying, well, that's part of the future. That's so far ahead, we don't even have to talk about it. We have to stay with sustainable aviation fuel. But something happened last year, and I will tell you what's happening. Also, during this year, Finavia, the Finnish company that owns the airports, and Avinor, the Norwegian company that owns the airports, both have bought their own electric airplanes this year and are trying out their airports. Elfly AS in Norway is a corporation that have started to buy. They have actually put the biggest purchase on electric aviation in the world, and they want to start a flying school because electric aviation, as I will tell you, is so much cheaper than the more regular ones, so it's really good for training pilots. So they will do that, or maybe they're also talking about taxis or going over the fjords in Norway and so on and so forth. And also, when Norway went out and told about 2040 that they will have all their domestic aviation electric, things started happen. And for example, Rolls-Royce now have one of their research centers in Trondheim for electric motors. We also have Heart Aero in Sweden that will build one of the first larger electric aircrafts in the world. But I will tell you more about that as well. Oh, now I'm going. Can I go back? Okay, 2050. That's the year we're all aiming for. That's when we should be carbon free, right? And the aviation industry was actually the first industry in the world setting the goals for 2050. But since they were first, they all only looked into getting 50% reduced emissions with 50%. So they need to do a recap probably one of these days, since now we are actually talking about zero emission of carbon 2050. But 2050 is also very far away. So for us as humans, it's kind of difficult to do something today, and we really do need to do something today because it's far away. We do start to feel the temperature is 1.1 today in rising and warming. So we start to feel a little bit, even here in the Nordics, of what will happen when we come up to 1.5 and even higher. But it's still far away. We don't really see the effects. So we tend to don't do too much or not do that much. But we need to, and we need to do it fast. So the climate psychologist says that we need to make it personal. My way to make it personal is to think about my grandma. My grandma, when in 2050, I will actually be 10 years younger than my grandma was when she died. They say I'm very much like her, so I hope to live when I'm as old as she got. So I need to see to it that we get a future that is livable, where I want to live. They also talk about that the coffee. We have a very good coffee maker in the town where I come from, Karlstad, and they talk about that we won't have coffee 2050, and I want to drink my coffee 2050. And also last year, and he's actually half Finnish because his dad is from Finland, I got my grandson, and I want him to be able to have the same life as I have had, to travel, to experience, to meet new friends, new cultures, learn things. I think it's equally dangerous if we don't move around, if we don't learn and meet other people and see that we are quite similar all around the globe. I think that can also lead to unsustainable actions. So I think it's important that we also keep on flying. Okay, just to give you some background, the emissions from aviation is 2% globally. Doesn't seem that much, but it's still too much, and we need to do something about it. And it's also rising because we are only 20% of us that has been flying so far. 80% of the population in the world have not yet been flying, and they will when they get a better economy. And we can also see this, that we want to fly and meet other cultures and so on. And this is a chart that came in December, where you can see where we have the most. These are how long the flights are, and you can see how much emission each flight takes. So you can see that actually here in the beginning, the shorter flights, they actually have a higher emission because, of course, there are more of them, and also in the beginning, when you fly off and when you land, it takes more fuel. And then you can see it's also more fuel here in the end, or more higher emissions in the end, and that's due to the high latitude. You know that we when you fly high, the coal particles also make clouds, which also will keep the earth warmer. Okay, but I thought maybe you also want to see some airplanes and hear more about the airplanes. This is the Pipistrel. This is the one you have here in Finland and that we have in Norway. It's also an airplane that we are thinking about buying in Sweden. It's about 1.5–2 million Swedish kroners. So it's not really that expensive. It's one of the first ones in the world electric aviations. It could run for about 1 hour and distances up to 180 kilometers. This is when we borrowed it in Gothenburg. So this is flying over Gothenburg in last May. But the Pipistrel is not really, you can't really have cargo in it. It's 2 people and it's full. So in December, this one from 1947, they actually changed it to an electric aviation. This was in Canada, and they were 10th of December they were flying with it. So this seems more like a more regular airplane, what we are used to, and this can also hold cargo. So things is actually happening quite fast now. So if we compare the two, I guess I already told you a little bit, but we call this the first and the second generation. And I will tell you a little bit about the third generation in the end, because we are moving on towards that. But as I told you, this was really, really the game changer, I would say, in this area. When Norway went out and said 2040 we will have electric aviation for our domestic. This is when the industry started to understand that they could put some money into here. That's when Airbus and Boeing and the other big guys started to talk about it as well. And we get some startups that actually put their thoughts and their ideas into action. And that's also when the Nordic innovation and the Nordic ministers started to think about that we actually need to gather the Nordics so we can keep on being a forerunner in this area. So it's funded by the Nordic Innovation. It runs from November last year until March 2022. We have a funding of 4 million Norwegian kroners from the Nordic Innovation, but we have about 12 million in the budget, and that's because all our project members also put in hours and money into the project. And it's basically now to look into, to map what we have, what we are doing in the Nordics, so we can actually start to do things together. As I told you, a lot have already happened, but if we start to put it all together, much more are going to happen. And we actually have a meeting tomorrow for this in Helsinki, when we will look into the standards. And these are the partners of the network so far. If you want to join, if you want to help us in some way, please let me know. But as you see here, what I think is really, we really do have people from all over the Nordics in it, and that's really strong. We have all the airports, we have all the airliners. So it's not just going to be talk. We're going to use this to do investigations, to find solutions together, and then these guys are going to go home and really make it happen. And that's important. Is it going to be a sound, you think? Or is it maybe no sound?
Yes, there's sound.
Oh, good.
Because it's part of the strategy of the company to be sustainable and be prepared for the future. And hopefully Iceland can contribute into work. It's operational expertise and technical expertise and the knowledge of the business models that could drive the change.
We do have the stakeholders that will make this happen. We have the airports, we have the airlines, so it's not that we are just sitting around discussing, because this is the input that they need to move on and actually do the implementation of the electric aviation.
Based on information we have from the aircraft producers, we think that the first electric or electrified aircraft could be in traffic in around 2025. They will be small and they will have limited range, but they could be perfect for many of the really short routes in Norway. My expectations to the Nordic network for electric aviation is that we could perhaps be an interesting testing spot. There's a lot of talk about collaboration and cooperation in the aviation sector, so if we could contribute to that, that's definitely an interesting place to be.
If we can show that this can be done in the Nordics, then that could be exported to other parts of the world, and maybe they can then do a leap, and they don't have maybe to take all the steps towards a more zero carbon aviation.
The changes I've seen for the last 20 years is the climate impact. We can see it directly in Greenland, flying on top of the ice cap. We see the melting of the ice cap. We see the glaciers withdrawing, getting smaller. So that's the big changes we have seen. And this is just for the last 15, 20 years. So just in short words, we are waiting for an electric aircraft, CS23 certified, painted red, and then we are ready to go.
So why do we need electric aviation? Well, there are three challenges for aviation today. One is profitability. At least in Sweden, we have had a couple of airliners that have been bankrupt, and it's happening all over the world. And accessibility. This is how it looks in an airport in Sweden today when you are not in the middle of the city, because then it looks like this, because this is a hub. Everyone to be economically feasible, you need to go to Stockholm and change there. So even if you are going between, say, Luleå and Umeå, and then you still have to go to Stockholm and go back, because it's not. We have to fill the planes to get it economically viable. Oh. And the climate. Well, we all know about this, don't we? And here you can actually see the heating in real time happening, and the fires that we have seen both in our countries but also in Australia, and the floods and everything else that this creates. So we really need to do something, and we need to do it now. If we put all these three together, in the middle there, we have a solution, and that is electric aviation. To find the solutions for this, these are the four objectives, and also the 4 work packages that we have for the Nordic network. We are working on the standards, both for the aviation but also for the airports. We work on business models, and we do think that this is a totally new way of transporting, so we think we will find new business models here. For example, you can go from short districts. This is more or less a bus with wings. So you can actually go from one hub to another. You don't have to go by nodes as you do in the air traffic today. And what will happen then? We only have 2% of flying between our Nordic countries that don't involve one of our city, what do you call it? Capitals. Thank you. One of our capitals. What happens if, for example, you could fly directly from Tammerfors to my town, Karlstad? What happens if our universities can start working together? I don't know if we have that much collaboration with Tammerfors, but we do with Åbo due to the forest. What happens if we can fly directly? Can we find even more sustainable solutions, maybe, even? Weatherproofing. If we can make electric aviation work here with our short landing and also with our climate, then we can make it work everywhere. And collaboration. We want to tell what we are doing here in the Nordics to the rest of the world, but we also want to learn from the world. One thing that we are thinking about is that, all the other undeveloped countries that are developing now and get into aviation, and maybe they can skip the fossil aviation. Maybe they can go directly to sustainable aviation fuel and electric aviation, as we have done, for example, in telecom, where they went directly to mobile phones. And that will also save a lot of CO2 for us. And this is kind of our goal picture. This is what we want to do. In the telecom industry, in the Nordics, we actually made the standards together. And when we went together and made the standards, then the world came after. And they actually took both the GSM and NMT, which was made here by us in the Nordics. So if we can do the same here, we can actually export this as well to the rest of the world. So, what can we win from a climate point of view with electric aviation? Well, there's zero operational emissions, of course. It's the lowest carbon footprint of all regional transport, including cars and buses and trains. It's scalable. And here, just to point out, this is the picture I showed you before. This is in the range where we will have electric aviation in quite a short time. Profitability is 75% lower fuel cost, 50% lower maintenance, so means that we can fly 18 people for the same cost as 76 in the regular aviation industry that we have today. Accessibility is lower noise. We can have shorter runaways and profitability for thin haul roads, as I told you. Then this is the aircraft that we want to build in Sweden, the Heart Aerospace is building. It's for 19 passengers, it's for 40 miles or 400 kilometers. They will have the prototype in 2022. They're actually before schedule right now, and it will be certified 2025. If you compare these three, then this new one actually have smaller engines, electric engines, than this one, but since it's 4 of them, it can still run the bigger aircraft. So, we need to do this together. It's really important that the Nordics come together. I do really think that we can help not only ourselves to reduce emission, we can also help the world. Maybe it's big words, but I do really think so. If we go ahead with the knowledge, the competence we have here, we are actually the 11th biggest economy in the world if we go together as one Nordics. And then we can actually do some change. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for those inspiring words. And if you think back to yesterday, somebody was talking about money at the end and how is this profitable? I think we know now. 11th biggest in the world if we're together. So let's get together and let's make this work and let's be a forerunner, just like we were for mobile phones. That we have the power here. We just need to use it. Thank you very much.
Could I just say one more thing that I thought? It's actually, if we look at if we think about the Norwegian goal of 2040 and using electric aviation for domestic flights, that's if we do the same calculation for the whole of Nordics, that's 2 million tons of CO2. And I mean, we will have the airplanes 2025, so I think we should talk to our ministers, make it happen.
Thank you.